are listening to the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. Enjoy the show.
Alright folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. Justin here with a quick word before we dive in. Now this week's episode features myself and veteran stage, screen, and voice actor Raphael Sbarge, and we chat about growing up behind the stage, acting methods, breaking into the business, Once Upon a Time, Mass Effect, and more. And as usual, if you enjoy the show and feel so inclined, please leave us a review wherever you're listening. And without further ado, here you go.
Greetings, boils and ghouls. This is your comrade, the Crypt Keeper here, reporting dead from the sanctuary of the strange. Tonight's macabre myth is a fright-filled feature, one overflowing with monsters, madness, and magic.
So Raphael, take us back in time. You're a kid. What sort of things were you into? Were you a big reader? Did you watch a lot of movies? Build forts? What's your childhood like?
I had a sort of a very unusual childhood because I grew up in New York City. I had two artist parents. My mother was a railway costume designer, and my dad was a wacky artist and painter and photographer and filmmaker. And we lived in a commune. We moved into a commune when I was about four and a half, on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. It was an old abandoned firehouse. It was wild. It was wild.
Sounds wild.
You know, it was at the time, the Lower East Side was pretty, it's pretty tough. I mean, we were very much the only white family. It was extreme poverty and a lot of, it just was it was not a neighborhood people generally went into who looked like us. They had this vision, and we moved in with all these people into this firehouse, and I spent a lot of time playing with the neighborhood kids, basically running around. They taught me how to jump backs of buses, and we used to hang out in this one abandoned kind of lot and wait for small furry animals, meaning rats, to kind of come, and we'd throw bricks, and it was a pretty urban experience. As far as what I like to do, I mean, to finish that, I guess, is to sort of say when I was living at the firehouses, because I was living on the Lower East Side, someone approached. They were looking for kids from Sesame Street, and so I got on Sesame Street. It was like one of the first years. I think it was the first year or one of the first years of Sesame Street in '69, and it was. I remember meeting, Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch and this guy Bob. I'm not sure if he's probably long gone, but he sat us down on a stoop and sang to us, and then Mr. Hooper put me on a donkey and talked about horses and donkeys, and I had all these vivid memories. I did about 4 or 5 of them, and I guess apparently my mother said that they offered me a contract to be on the show, and she said no because she didn't want to be a stage mother. It was just hanging out in a big drafty warehouse, and who knew what Sesame Street was, and she had her own career, and then she also said, look, if you want to be an actor, you got to figure this out yourself. It's going to be, it's too hard. You'd want to kind of she didn't want to be a stage mother. So that was interesting, because my parents were crazy and artists. We moved around a whole lot. My mother was teaching at NYU, and then we moved up to Yale, and she was teaching at Yale, at the Yale Drama School, when a lot of really fancy people were there, like Meryl Streep, Sigourney Weaver, and Wendy Wasserstein, and a lot of amazing folks. And anyway, I started doing some play. They needed kids, and so I did some plays up at the Yale Rep in New Haven. And then I started watching things like Star Trek, and then I started watching things like there was the late movie, I think, or the $1 Million I think it was a late movie. Anyway, they had like a Jimmy Cagney week or something, and every night there'd be like a Jimmy Cagney movie. I just remember going, oh my God. I think that was the moment where I thought, that's it. Like, that's it. And then I loved Fred Astaire. And then I had a huge crush on Shirley Temple. Oh my God. And I was so brokenhearted when I found out that she was actually married. The point that I discovered her. And then I learned to tap dance. I remember tap dancing. She inspired me to tap dance. I don't tap dance anymore, but that was pretty fun. I guess like a lot of kids would, sort of kind of, my mom was working and I'd come home and I'd watch TV, And a lot of those things were, I loved the Wild Wild West, and I loved, and I saw at least every episode of Star Trek. That's the original, of course, the Shatner one, at least 3 times. And then when I was 10, I remember I went to my first Star Trek convention, and I got dropped off. This is in the days when, back, I don't know, in the 70s, it was like literally like, here's 50 cents and a cigarette. I'll catch you later on. It was such a different world, man. It's just so wild, the crazy stuff. Anyway, so I remember going to the Star Trek convention and wandering around, by myself. And I just remember being so amazed at the people and the outfits and Star Trek stuff. And then Gene Roddenberry was there, and he spoke. Man. Yeah, it was really, and I remember it vividly because he put something in my head. He said, one day, he said, you're going to be able to go to your television and watch whatever you want. And I thought, wow, that's wild. Because there were 3 stations at that point. And I got his autograph. I remember that. I'm pretty excited. I still have it's somewhere in a drawer somewhere, but I have his autograph. And then I started collecting comic books. This is that moment before you discover girls. I got really into comic books.
Building up to it.
In a really intense, like a prepubescent way, I guess. I just started buying comic books, and I would, go. We were now living in Brooklyn, and then I would go and take whatever lunch money I had and go, and I don't know. I guess I'm sort of a mini geek, but those are the things that I kind of were sort of into, and I had kind of I guess you could say, sort of a left of center upbringing.
Just to poke at that Star Trek interest for a second, what did you think when The Next Generation came out? Were you one of the ones that were opposed?
I wasn't opposed. I knew a bunch of those actors. They were friends of mine, and I was excited about that. Clearly, there was an appetite. There is an appetite for Star Trek. It's such a visionary show, and it holds up. And it holds up in a million iterations. I'm dear friends with Armin Shimmerman, for example, in the Deep Space. So like, there's so many different ways to tell these wonderful stories. And Armin, though, I have to say, and I tell this to him all the time, Armin had to go through, I think, something like 4 or 5 hours of makeup every morning, and then 3, and those days are freakishly long, right? They're like 14-hour days. I don't care what you're doing 14 hours. It's too long. And then you got to add the makeup on either side of that. And it would get hot. I think he's a superhero. I think Armin is one of the great, anyway, he's a great guy. And his wife, Kitty Swank, are dear friends. But I'm wandering off into the weeds.
No, Armin's great. But when you say his name, the first thing that pops into my head is Principal Snyder in Buffy. That's one of my favorite roles of his. Great actor.
He's great. He's great.
Along the ride, you just mentioned you were into comics, you were into Star Trek. When did you start taking or pursuing acting seriously and maybe say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. I can do this.
I did a bunch of those plays, and then, again, my mother was designing it, and they just needed kids. And I grew up backstage, right? So I would hang out with the actors, and I would help my mother age costumes. She'd be doing some big period epic, and they'd have to have, mud on the armor, and I'd be, it was so fun to be there. And they were cool people, and the actors always, they were so nice to me, and they would sort of adopt me. And I guess it's sort of what it must feel like to join the circus, right? It's like, oh, wow, the circus is in town. That's magic. And yet, there was nothing about it, because it was all coming at it from kind of backstage. There was nothing about it that was about, hey, I want to be famous, or hey, I want to be looked at. It wasn't that remotely. It was really about this kind of sense of it being a craft, and it being something you work on, and something then you evolve. Career, something you evolve. I mean, I don't think I would have ever had the words for that then, but that's what I saw everywhere, right? I remember seeing Meryl in some of those early plays, and because I would go to all the dress rehearsals of all the shows, and being kind of like, what's that, whatever that thing that Meryl Streep has. I mean, you could see it then, right? So anyway, my mom and I moved back to New York. I decided to be an actor, so my dad took my headshots because he's a photographer. My mother had an actor friend, and she said, well, call her. So I called her, and she said, well, here's my agent's phone number. give him a call. I'm 13, just 12, just turned 13. I was like, okay, very precocious kid. And so I called them, made an appointment, got on my bike, went across town over to the agent's office, and I went in and I said, hey, and I had a real resume at this point. I mean, I had a couple credits, right? And so, well, we don't take child clients, but what's your story? And I said, well, they said, who was your representation before? And I said, representation? What's representation? I don't know what that is. And they said, well, okay, do you sing? And I said, oh, yeah, I sing. And I'd been in a boys' choir, and I'd sung boy treble in this choir. We actually went to England and sang Canterbury Cathedral. But I was like, oh, yeah, I sing. And so I broke into the treble part of Handel's Messiah. Oh, God, it's really a precocious kid. Anyway, so they're like, whoa, okay, we're going to send you out. So the first thing they sent me out on was like a Jell-O commercial, and I got it. I got my SAG card. I started studying in New York. I started going to all sorts of classes, and then I actually started making a little bit of money in commercials so I could afford the classes. And my mother, again, had nothing to do with it. I mean, I figured it out by which I could work and then bring the contracts home to be signed because I was a minor. You didn't have to be on the set. There are no child labor laws, at least there weren't then in New York. And so I could go and work and then come back. And so I started, in Shakespeare in the Park at 16. I did my first Broadway show with Faye Dunaway at 16. Started my first movie at 17. And then I did Risky Business as I was graduating high school. And I went to school with some fancy people who've gone on to be very fancy, including Matthew Broderick and Kira Sedgwick and Kenny Lonergan, who's won a lot of Oscars and nominated incredible writer, director, and then Mike Diamond, one of the Beastie Boys. So it was an art school. Yeah. And we did plays together. I remember doing one of Kenny's first plays at the theater there. And there's something about being in New York because you can get around because there's public transportation and you can kind of find your way. And because we had this sort of kind of I want to say almost like no supervision. I've spoken to other people who lived in New York at the time. I was like, did your mother ever, no. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like you just sort of found your way. And New York was an artsier, kind of rougher place than it is now. It's still kind of rough, but that's what I love about it. So anyway, the whole kind of deciding to be an actor just sort of came, I think, out of kind of being around the community and being around the actors, working in the theater and creating something magical. And it seemed like, that seems like that would be really fun. Theater is my first love. It's where I feel most at home. I haven't done a lot of theater in a bunch of years, but it's something that I really do hope to come back to. When they say born in a trunk, I was kind of really literally like backstage. My mother did a play on Broadway. It was a sort of a famous flop. It literally was called The Freaking Out of Stephanie Blake, and it was this giant play that opened and closed on opening night. My mother brought all the costumes home, and I remember putting them on and like doing a show, and my dad took a picture of me. Anyway, so I was around these things, and it just seemed, I guess it seemed like, yeah, let's go to the circus. It just seemed like the right thing to be, right place to be.
You just said theater is your first love. As an actor, what are some of the challenges that theater and screen, some of the differences between those two and the challenges that one presents as opposed to the other?
Any theater actor will tell you that it is the greatest experience to be in front of a live audience. There's just nothing more enlivening than that experience. In addition to that, what you learn doing plays is not what is encouraged. It's not a skill set that you need to do a movie. When you do a movie, they take all the sequence of all the scenes and they basically schedule them. It's called boarding them. And basically they schedule them so that you might do the first scene somewhere in the middle of the movie and the last scene like the second day, and it's all out of order, right? So you have to figure out a way to kind of create a cohesion and an arc, because obviously when it gets all put together, you have to kind of have thought of kind of where you might be in the trajectory, right? So doing plays really helps that enormously. Doing plays also gives, I always sort of feel like theater actors, just have a bass note, as it were, like a bottom note, that because of what's required, that sets them. I often feel like I can see that in an actor. It's tough work. You do, if you do a New York Broadway schedule, it's 8 shows a week. 2 on Wednesday, 2 on Saturday, 1 on Sunday. Sometimes it's, 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and then you're off on Monday. And, you're only working 2 hours a day, but it's all out. You got to really blow it out, right? And to create that, to find it in that moment, depending on the show, right? But even a comedy or a musical, it requires an enormous amount of energy out in order to be able to kind of create it and create something on the air. The other thing is that, of course, a play the actors become a living, breathing organism. The 4 instruments, for example, in a chamber piece, it's all about the listening and about the breathing and about kind of how we feel one another so that you create the music. And that's also, of course, what's so wonderful about doing a play is that you are listening and you are engaged. You're listening to the audience as well, particularly when you're doing a comedy, because they'll tell you when it's funny and they'll tell you when it's not. So there's a wonderful way to understand the mechanism of what's involved in being an actor. And when people say, like, hey, could you have any advice being an actor? I don't know how this all works. I just feel like it's just such a bizarre, you feel like it's life such a zigzag. And then, of course, you turn around and you look back and you go like, oh, I guess that was kind of a straight line. In point of fact, I have no tips for how to get into being, an actor. But when I started and where things are now, it's very different. What I can say is that my work as an actor in the theater has informed everything. It is really was my training, and it's what I rely on, and it's when you're stuck with a moment in a scene and you don't know how to quite make it work, it's my theater training that essentially gives me sort of a some rabbit to pull out of figure out how to make it kind of sing.
Since you had so much theater training early on, when you make that initial jump to screen, did you have to, because a lot of folks that I talk to that start in theater speak about how they have to bring themselves down because they're not trying to reach the back row, and they kind of struggle with that at first?
Yeah, there's some of that for sure. I mean, I don't know, like for whatever combination of reasons, I didn't struggle with it. There have been times in my life where it's been a little harder than others, maybe because I'm doing too much training or too much voice training, for example, so that, my voice sounded a little too Juilliard or something, I don't know what. Not that I never went to college actually, but there are things, there's a lot of training. There's a lot of acting training that I think is really, my humble opinion, which is really about justifying itself in a way, and it doesn't necessarily give one a chance to just find, what's your how do you creatively find your way to something. And when I've been as a teacher, sometimes when I've worked with actors who've had a lot of heavy training, conservatory training, sometimes it's a matter of kind of getting them back to their, I want to say kind of like their childlike instincts again, okay, I know you can do, Chekhov, and I know you can do it probably in the original Russian, but I want to just, let's just see if we can find this moment, just you and me, let's just play. Sometimes training can actually kind of turn out acting robots, I think. It's my humble opinion, and that, and people then go, like, how come I can't work? I've got all this training. And I don't know that training it's not the solution to figuring out how to act. You have to have training. I'm not saying that, of course, right. But I am saying that sometimes actors, when they get nervous, for example, they go to their training, they go to their actor. And sometimes you need to actually not do that. You want to actually just go to your human and bring your human forward,
Well said. Sesame Street by the time you're 4, Broadway by 16. And you mentioned Risky Business, Tom Cruise. What are your memories of that set when you think back? Was it kind of nuts?
Very memorable. I mean, I so many memories. Tom was, it's hard to imagine now because he's just such a phenom. I really enjoy Tom. I mean, I so enjoy watching him. He's got so much charisma. He's just so watchable. He's just always so watchable. I just was reading a review about, the new Top Gun, and the reviewer said, look, you may have to turn off your brain, but, at the end of the day, you can't help but love the fact is that, this guy is so interesting to watch. And he is. And so, but before he was kind of a
global figure,
Tom Cruise, yeah. Right? He was a sweet kid. We're both, I remember both of us hanging out a bunch. He was very good friends with Sean Penn, who was shooting Bad Boys, a movie that Sean did early in his career in Chicago as well. So we used to hang out, all of us together. I remember thinking that Sean was just really kind of intense and a little scary.
Not far off.
I've told this story a couple of times, but I was on the set, and this is actually sort of a fun, quirky factoid. But if you watch Risky Business, and there's a moment where Tom, his parents are away, and he gets in the Porsche, and he turns on the, you can see that it's a shot from the outside of the car, and you see the taillights come on, and that great, Tangerine Dream comes on, boom, 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 whatever it is, and then suddenly you think, oh my God, and then the car stalls, and then he turns it back on again, and then he backs out. Sean is actually in the car with him that night. He was visiting the set. In the script, it's Bronson Pinchot, but as it turns out, Sean was just hanging out, and Bronson wasn't there at that moment for that shot, and so Sean's in the car with him, which is fun.
I wonder if that's in the little movie factoids, or if that's an original Raphael note.
I told it on another interview several years ago, and then I've seen it pop up since. Because I was there. I was on the set, so I remember. But it's kind of fun.
So I got to ask you about one of your credits specifically. You were involved in the TV series Werewolf.
Yes.
How did that happen? That you cannot find that show at all anymore today. It's
Really?
pretty much gone unless you've gone through perhaps illegal means a few years ago to get it. But yeah, I loved that show. Great effects.
Yeah, they were great effects, and it was a really cool show. I remember getting the part of playing the guy that basically bit the guy who became the werewolf, right? I'm sort of in that first episode. So he's the reason why there was a series, and then the character I think ends up dying. I can't remember what happens, but yeah, it was pretty fun. I mean, it was definitely, I think it went on for like 3 seasons or something, 3-4 seasons.
Yeah.
The guy, is his name Eric something? What was his name?
Oh, you asked me. I'm going to have to Google
All right, you have to look it up. That's what got me Google. But anyway, he really sweet guy. Really handsome, really sweet guy, really just kind of charming, really landed this great big job, and it was like, and he was great, and it was a fun show, and I didn't keep watching it, at some point, but I do remember it being it was really fun, and I remember thinking that it was also really well shot, and kind of a cool show.
Yeah, it's one of those cool cult shows that just kind of disappeared, Not available digitally or physically or anything, really. So you've done a lot of voice work as well. Was that something you felt you had a knack of early on, or was it just a sort of an audition came about and it happened naturally?
Yeah, I did commercials for years and years and years, on-camera commercials. And again, that was to sort of, as a way to kind of support myself, particularly when I was in New York City at the time. And it was, and I did, for like 20 some odd years, I did commercials. At some point, as I was working more, I wanted to be on camera less and be able to still be able to figure out other income streams, right? Because, as actors, we work. Sometimes you can get well paid for a short amount of time, and then poof, it's gone. And you've got to somehow squirrel that till the next job comes along, or residual. Or if you can find other ways to make some money doing what you do, that's the way to go. So at the time, video games were relatively a new phenomenon, and I did a bunch of them, and I happened to audition for this incredible game. Well, 2. One is Knights of the Old Republic, which has been remade multiple times, it's been kind of reintroduced, and they're doing it again. And then I'm doing Mass Effect, which was, again, just had no idea that it would be such a giant thing. The Mass Effect community is one of the most loving, caring, passionate community. I just adore being a very small part of that game, and I am, whether people like to run up to me and tell me whether they killed my character in Vermeer or not. I'm happy either way that you're happy. Like it's okay. I don't take it personally. What I can say is that BioWare, who created the game, they are, there's good and there's great, and then there's BioWare.
Top notch. Yeah.
There's just nothing, and they did something. The game has been sort of compared to kind of like the Star Wars of video games in a way. It was
very
sort of
close. Yeah, that's fair.
I'm just repeating what I've read or what
Yeah,
I've heard.
yeah,
That
that's very
had
fair.
a way of sort of defining something that had been previously undefined, and that obviously lots of wonderful imitations, and then furthering of that, they did something with story that was really profound. They did something with sort of a kind of a naturalistic approach at that point, because a lot of the video games that I'd done up until then were kind of more character-y in a way, and what they had said at the time is, no, we want it more like an episode of 24. We want it really real, very kind of like cinematic, or keep it grounded. Jenny McSwain was the director that kind of, really directed that at the time, and she had such a wonderful ear for what that was, and then where we were off track. And I just give her so much credit at the time, as well as, of course, then, everything that happened, the design, the writing, and the world that was created, which is so rich. And then, of course, because BioWare is so astonishing and so ahead of everything is that they knew that there was going to be a pandemic. They planned it. They're like, okay, let there be a pandemic when everyone needs it the most. We're just going to drop this, legendary edition because people are going to be at home and they're going to need, to kind of like, be entertained. And so we're going to do that for them. And they did. And God bless them. They are really not only hit a nerve, I think kind of created kind of like a nuclear explosion of sorts, with a community who, really, it's meant so much to them. And people have found me on Cameo and other, kind of social media sources and just expressed to me how it's kept them going, how it's kind of their way to stay strong, how it's about, more than just it's so much more than a game, right?
Right.
And so again, it is such a privilege to be in this community. Whether you killed me in Vermeer or I still love you.
So sidebar, when people come up to you, do you feel like more people kill you or more people did not kill you?
It seems to break down on sort of gender lines in a certain sense, a little bit. I mean, because you've got this Ashley, who's this, hot chick, basically. So a lot of guys seem to kind of gravitate to her, which I understand. A lot of women stay with Caden, and a lot of gay men, LGBTQ community love Caden. Also, BioWare did two specific things. They brought more women into gaming than anyone else prior to that. And again, that was because of the relationships, I think, because of the writing, right? And that wasn't just with Caden, it was obviously with lots of other characters. In addition to that, they were also the first kind of video game to be able to sort of recognize the ability for two characters to be same-sex and have romances, same-sex romances. Fantastic, amazing, so important. This was pre-Prop 8, and it was such a wonderful thing that they had kind of embraced it. So this was just a way where, I think the media that is what we consume and is so important to us and affects our imaginations and is a part of our lives, our inner lives and our ways of thinking, and influences how we think. It had a powerful effect on I think in terms of kind of really all of us moving in the right direction. Anyway, so I know that was part of, Caden, the guy who's the model, who is not this face, is very, very pretty. We were at Comic-Con in San Francisco, and it was like, the face, the voice, the voice, the face. We did pictures together. It's sort of funny. Anyway, I think it's probably broad. I think it's a generalization to say that it's just general lines, because I know there are lots of guys who love Caden and there are lots of women who prefer Ashley. But the thing that's cool, this is what I will say about it, is that BioWare, the Mass Effect universe, it sets it up so that choice in Vermeer is so epic. And you as a player then, I think, have a kind of a physio-psychic, emotional experience to understanding consequences. Because when you make that decision, the game goes this way. What's so powerful about it is not so much even who you choose, I think, but even just the fact is that it creates such an emotional response in everyone who then makes that choice. There are people that write me and say, I always keep you in Vermeer, and there are people say like, oh, I killed you in Vermeer, sucker, and, great, whatever. But isn't it interesting that actually is like a powerful thing for you as relates to kind of what they did in terms of the storytelling, because it really is, that's all made up, right? And that's just sort of but people have these sort of really powerful emotional responses to that decision.
Right. You said yourself you started doing voice acting when games were relatively new. Well, in terms of voice acting and games being relatively new. So how has that process, technologically wise, behind the scenes changed for you from when you started to now? Is it night and day?
Yeah. Just the way everything is, it's all virtual now. You're in a session with everyone on Zoom. I did a game during the pandemic, and I remember, do you remember that point where you felt like you were taking your life in your hands going to Rite Aid, and it all just felt scary, and we're all sort of asocialized, and we're social animals. But I remember going to this session in the midst of COVID. We had to wipe down everything and spray it and, test it. And I think this was even before the test. And I don't remember. But I remember the director on camera and I'm in the booth, and I just remember oh, someone's talking to me. It was just sort of it was more of an antiseptic experience. It was a bit more kind of like get in the trench and we'll all dig it together kind of experience, at least initially. That said, obviously it's become much more efficient. We used to actually get pages of scripts. So when we go into Mass Effect, we'd have a 4-hour session. They'd say, okay, here. And then you would take the page and you'd turn it. And I would just let them drop on the floor, and then I would just sort of and then I'd collect them up afterwards. But, it'd be like all your lines on that page. And now, of course, it's all whiz bang and computer, all that. So yeah, it's a funny. I mean, the technology has changed us in every way.
So I've been holding off on it. Once Upon a Time, one of the biggest shows on television during its run. Can you just take us through how the opportunity came about for you and how you ultimately landed the role?
It's a funny story. My son, his name is Django. I dropped him off at preschool once, and apparently, so the story goes, his teacher said, "Django, your dad, he looks familiar. What does he do?" And he thought for a second. He went, he auditions.
It's the truth.
It's what we do, right? We just spend all of our time auditioning, When we actually get a job, it's like, oh my God, I show up and someone gets me lunch and I hit my mark and say my lines and then I go home and audition again. So I auditioned for it, the old-fashioned method. In the pilot, it's only, honestly, just like 6 lines, but it was a relationship with Dr. Hopper, aka Jiminy Cricket, and Henry. His, in a way, at the time, it sort of almost like he was a surrogate dad in a way, or an uncle. I had my son, and so that relationship was. I love Django, and it was an easy relationship for me to find. Right, I think in the wrong hands, it could seem a little weird or creepy. I don't know. So they said they'd seen a bunch of people, and they felt like. The casting on the show was amazing. I read the script and I was like, this is incredible. They'll never be able to pull it off. It's way too ambitious. But this is great. Like on the page, like, whoa. We shot it and then we were all, nervously showed up, a kind of a screening. Eddie and Adam Kitsis, they're the creators and the showrunners, and they had a screening room at their agent's office, and they said, well, we don't know yet, looking good. I'm sure it was picked up, they just didn't say anything. Here it is. Well, the lights went out and it was the whole cast, right? It was just us, Ginny and Josh and Lana and Jennifer and Tony Mandola and I think Lee was there, Lee Ehrenberg, and a bunch of the Canadian actors weren't there because this was in Los Angeles. We love them, but anyway, the lights came up and we were all just gobsmacked. Like, holy Moses. Like, not only was it good, but it was so much even better than I had even possibly imagined it could be. And this is where, again, what's so fun about filmmaking is that it is a communal art. It is a group effort. People really come together and bring their specific little bit of artistry to make everything else sing. And so Once Upon a Time was a very complicated show, lots of costumes, lots of visual effects, people going back and forth, really interesting stories, wonderful, complex parts for actors. There are so many people that went into making that really special, but there was, I think, an enormous amount of pride taken in the making of it, because at some point we all realized it was something really special. I mean, I remember even the guy parking the cars once in Vancouver was like, "We love this show. My family watches it every week. I'm just so happy to be here. You guys are great, and thank you so much." And I'm so happy to be on the show. So there was a sense like through the ranks, like, right. Wow, this was something that we all felt special about. And I also know, again, and this is a testament to the writing, is that really led the way, to take characters that you sort of knew, like maybe you'd seen them elsewhere or read about them, and so you already have a relationship with them, right? You sort of like, you think you know them, but then get reintroduced to them, and then actually put them in a mosh, right, together, and then tell their backstories, which is wicked cool. And then by the end of it, you go like, oh my God, so these are people that you already knew, but now you really know in a whole new way. So what that did then was that all these people, all these families said that they would watch it together, because Grandma loved it, loved the costumes, loved all the the cute boys and girls and all the fun stories, but then also 5 and 6 year olds who weren't scared by some of the stuff loved it, and then everyone in between, mom and dad. I mean, like it had a little something. So in a world that is or was, well, that is still so kind of segmented in terms of people's viewing and in terms of what everyone goes to their device now to watch whatever. This was sort of a Sunday night kind of gather around the fire, basically, and enjoy it. And it seemed like it had something for everyone. And so I was always so moved and again amazed that they had been able to do something that actually brought everyone together. It's so hard to think about it. I mean, how many shows now even have something that everyone wants to watch? I mean, there's a gajillion channels, and there's so much to watch, and it's so hard anyway to figure out anything. But I'm just overwhelmed by all the amazing shows. But at the time, have a network show that spoke to that many people, and then internationally, I get tweets and letters and digital postcards from literally all over the world. Yeah. And that's because these stories, and an American entertainment doesn't, the term is travel, right? It doesn't travel. It does well in America. Like American comedies don't generally play well in Italy. They do, I mean, some of them do, but I mean, it's sometimes things are relegated to the country that they're made in. And this is a show because these stories are so kind of universal, these myths and legends and Grimm's fairy tales and all the stuff that they sort of, and the Disney that they took from, spoke culturally to so many different other places in the world. And so again, just an amazing thing they did. Just an amazing thing. Not that we didn't know that it was wonderful when we were doing it, because we did, but there's that thing sometimes when you look back, even at a distance, in a way, it becomes even more remarkable.
Yeah.
Because of you go like, wow, that's lightning in a bottle. Like that was really something special. And of course, now it gets to sort of live on in Disney Plus world. And I've had a whole bunch of people sort of say, I've just discovered it, and how fun. And I'm now watching, the entire 6 seasons again. It's like, oh my God. Oh, but wow. But I mean, that's obviously what's so, I think it will have a kind of an evergreen kind of quality. People will keep coming back to it.
And you said it there, man. That gather around the fire kind of ageless, depending on, grandmother, young kid, network type of show is very few and far between. It's almost dead, I would say. Like in the 90s, you had the era of the sitcom, maybe Family Matters and Full House and stuff like that people would watch. But but not anything recently that I can think of. I think Once Upon a Time may be last of a dying breed of show.
Yeah, that's probably right. I mean, I can't say. It sounds like you're more of an expert than I am in terms of just culturally, in terms of what's out there. But it's really unusual and remains extraordinary, even as time goes by.
I'd say I'm a consumer, not an expert.
Speak with authority. What can I say?
You mentioned this too. So you're dealing with characters that we all know, and that have a history. So how do you approach that history as an actor? Respect it while adding your own sort of touch on it.
Well, with Jiminy Cricket, I was extremely nervous because he was he's such a beloved character, and I didn't want to mess it up. I loved this whole concept of him being, a therapist. Let your conscience be your guide. I love this whole idea that came out in the script, which was this idea that he had basically done the wrong thing for so long, and that he had, in doing the wrong thing for so long, he had ultimately determined that he didn't want to do that anymore. He wanted to dedicate his life to doing the right thing, and thus he became who he was. The thing that saved me ultimately, and what I clung to, was the script and the writing. I mean, when I auditioned for it, and they said, "Oh, they want you to play Jiminy Cricket," and I was like, "Oh, what do they want? Like a voice match?" And I said, what do you, Jiminy Cricket? Like, what do you want? And they said, "No, just keep it real." I think in a way that was kind of the hallmark, right? Kind of the keep it real is very much what they banked on, and grounding. And people like Lana and Jennifer and Ginny and Josh, who did so much heavy lifting in terms of just year after year after year of so much complicated story. At some point it got a little complicated for me. That's just my opinion, because it just was so, everyone was everyone's brother and sister and aunt and uncle and son, and I lost track of, like, I remember watching at one point, there was actually like a running tape at the bottom which actually was sort of explaining, like, so and so is so and so, and so, like, you had to kind of know the references, the Dark Queen and this Queen. So it got a little complicated for me, but that said, the actors keeping it real was really kind of what, again, I think a cornerstone for how it was approached, and I know that was encouraged, and I think that again created the approachability and the emotional connection that people had to these characters, because they were just so genuine.
So you could go back in time, take a second crack at a role, maybe take a different approach. What would it be and why?
Oh my, I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, I think roles come to you at a point in time because there's something in you that kind of emanates something in the story. In other words, there's some part of you that is in line with what they want in terms of the storytelling and in terms of kind of the currents in you, the tremors and electrical static that is in your life at the moment. Because I work inside out and not outside in. I do tend to kind of like it. I just kind of put myself in that place and let it happen. I don't really second guess. I'm also not a big one to go back and watch a lot of my work, and a lot of times I don't even watch my work at all. I mean, I watched a whole bunch of them once upon a time because I loved the show, I was a fan of the show. But as it got deeper into the shows, I didn't watch anymore, and I was just on The Rookie, and I, for example, and I haven't watched it yet. I'm not sure if I will. I mean, I love doing it. It's nothing about The Rookie. I love The Rookie. It's just that I don't I don't like. I did it. I had the experience, and it seems to have worked, and I'm happy about that. I guess I don't go back and second guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great answer. What's the best piece of acting advice you've received in your career?
It's not his week because he just basically, I think, got fired from a show. But Frank Langella, I did a play with Frank Langella, and Frank is a giant actor in the theater. There's almost no one alive that does what Frank does, and I have such profound respect for him as an actor. So we did this play called Booth is Back. Basically, it's about the lives of Edwin and Junius Booth. It's a fantastic story about a father-son relationship. At the time, sorry, there's a little bit of an involved story.
Maybe you're fine.
At the time, he was doing My Fair Lady at Houston Grand Opera, and we were sort of overlapping. So we were rehearsing during the day, and then he was doing the show at night. So in the play that we were doing, Edwin Booth was his father's dresser, and that was actually historically accurate. And so what happened was Frank had a dresser, but I was sort of, for a couple of performances, was sort of a surrogate dresser, kind of in the preparation for the role, as it were. Frank wasn't a singer, but he did this, part in My Fair Lady, and it was a big show. And the Houston Grand Opera, for anyone who's seen it, is stunning. It's like a jewel box. It's so huge and massive. And before the show starts, basically there's a scrim that you would stand behind as the actors on stage, and all the audience would be, rumble, rumble, rumble coming in. And he sort of put his arm over my shoulder. And I remember looking out, I had a towel over my neck, because I was his dresser. And I remember just being kind of sort of overwhelmed by this sort of sense of kind of like, wow, standing on stage and feeling the kind of the energy from everyone coming in. And I said, Frank, do you ever get nervous? And he looked at me and he said, no, I think, let me at him. I love that, that place where, you can get to in your work, where you can think, well, you're leaning forward, you're at that place where you want to go, just, let me at him, let me, just like the appetite, the hunger, the kind of that is the hallmark of Frank on stage. That's why he's so exciting to watch on stage. And it was a great acting lesson.
Have you seen any recent films that have moved you?
Yes. I just saw the Mincemeat movie, Mincemeat Affair, I think, Mincemeat, which is a lovely British film for Netflix. My cousin does the PR at Netflix, and so I went to a screening of that, and it's wonderful. Sort of old-fashioned kind of period epic, which I really loved. What else? God, I just gone blank. There's so many wonderful movies that we saw. I've gone blank. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Happens to me every day.
It's probably too much time alone. I don't know.
Well, Raphael, just to wrap up here, like I said, I'm not going to keep you all evening. What's on the horizon for you? Anything in the pipeline?
Yes, I'm in this show called Gaslit with Sean Penn and Julia Roberts, and that'll be airing. I'm in some of the later episodes, and I'm excited about that. Thrilling to work with Dan Stevens and Betty Gilpin, unbelievable actors. Love them. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. I'm in a couple of video games that I can't talk about, but those are fun. I've been doing a lot of work as a director, so I've just finished a documentary feature called Only in Theaters about a really substantial and renowned and beloved family called the Langella family, who runs an art house cinema in Los Angeles that for 3 to 4 generations. There's been a Langella in the movie business since there's been a movie business. It's sort of about kind of the journey that this family goes through, and now we sort of backed into all these challenges with what's happening with the future of exhibition. I had some wonderful filmmakers talk to me, like Cameron Crowe and Ava DuVernay and James Ivory and Alison Anders and Nicole Holofcener. Anyway, lots of Oscar winners were interested in talking about this and about the Langella theaters and about how much it meant to them. We're out to festivals at the moment. We'll be, hopefully coming to a theater, near you in the fall or in the early part of the new year. That's the plan. And you can find it on we've got a Facebook page which has updates. We're at festivals. Perhaps we'll be coming to festivals, near you. But I'm very proud of the movie. And then I just directed a 4-part docuseries for PBS that'll be out in January of 2023. I'm just editing that now. So, and that's set in Watts. And there'll be more about that as we get closer. But it's a wonderful story. It's a privilege to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thank you for giving me some of your time this evening and
Justin,
chatting with me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah, thank you so much.
You have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you down the road, man.
All right, man.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the night. You think you know Night Demon? Then the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast is for you. Step into the darkness as we peel back the curtain to give you an unprecedented, all-access look into the mind and the heart of the demon. We're talking band history, song analysis, studio anecdotes, stories from the road. It's everything a diehard Night Demon fan could want and more. This is the only place to learn the inside scoop, the deep dive trivia, the untold tales from the band members themselves and those closest to the Night Demon story. Need more? The Sacred Night Demon Crypt will be pried open to reveal demo recordings that have never before seen the light of day, all with in-depth commentary by the band and the people who were there for the writing and recording process. This is a gold mine, a treasure trove of all things Night Demon. Head over to nightdemon.net or wherever you listen to podcasts. Listen to podcasts.